Andreas. Thanks a lot for this overview on the software development and also to show how it works in practice. Question for clarification?
A comment. Is that allowed now?
That's allowed within half a minute, because now I would like to invite Piet Sellke. He will be the moderator of the discussion section from Dialogique and work package leader of 4. So,
thank you very much. Just to listen here, Piet Sellke is my name from Biologic in Stuttgart. We're working in the social assessment, and I'm happy to moderate this session now. So we had a first comment from you.
Yes, it is a comment on the DSS. Actually, I love the tool. I love the idea. I was promoting it, so I have to love it. I only have a problem with what is written on page 52 of the handbook, which, I mean, I don't know if you have discussed it with Wojciech Klimek, who is the officer in charge of this process, but here you are making a marketing advertisement to a specific commercial product, which is not allowed. So you cannot say in a project funded by European money, you have to buy EcoInvent in order to make this running. So that's absolutely not possible. So please make a change to the document. Because I saw in your presentation you said you have to upload a database, which is fine.
I did, yeah.
But you cannot point to people and say you have to buy that database, because that is not endorsed by the Commission. We cannot do that. So please take action.
Thanks for the comment.
I want to say, as dissemination partner, I hear this and I'll take responsibility for being sure that the digital edition is changed.
So I guess we have some more questions on the presentations we just heard on the difference. So here's the first one, right?
Sorry for being always asking questions, but yeah, very stimulating debate. So I have a question for Paula about in the final slide. You mentioned the fact that quantity matters, and I fully agree with you. But this is a clear measure impact on life cycle assessment, because we are using functional unit. So is ProSuite, I don't understand the conclusion from your presentation, if is it ProSuite recommending to leave out the functional unit as a method for comparing products, or what else?
No, what I was meaning is that, of course, you need to have functional units, but as also Martin was saying that in the beginning, if you want to have an idea of the impacts on sustainability of a given technology, you have to consider the overall scale, global scale. So it's not only functional unit, but scale matters. So that's what I was meaning. I was just not dismissing the functional unit approach, but I was saying that scale matters when we are assessing sustainability.
Okay, and how much, this is for Andreas, how much is this implemented in the decisions of approval? The question of the overall penetration in the market of the specific product, how much is this implemented in the decisions?
Yeah, there's a specific, yes, thanks for reminding me. There's a specific diffusion model implemented that Richard has explained, that basically calculates how fast in a certain time, or how much in a certain time a certain technology is used in the market. And this can be applied in the decision support tool also, when you can press that button, and then you get this aspect into your calculations.
Thank you. I think there was a question right there.
Yeah, good morning, Christian Lavoie from the European Aluminium Association. I have a specific question about the uncertainty, because, okay, it's quite clear that we have here an issue with subjective choices which are linked to this weighting process. But I am wondering, because you start from indicators where some are quite robust and some are not so much robust. So then you can track also the robustness at the end of the day of these indicators and link the results to the level of uncertainty. So I'm wondering if you can also track that because obviously the results can depend also on some the robustness of the starting indicators you are using in your methodology.
So your question is about to what extent in all the steps in the in ProSuite uncertainty is included and quantified or not? Is that yes? Yeah. At least what has been shown also for the weighting factors, there is an actual range depending on let's say who's answering the weighting question. So you can have a sensitivity analysis included in the assessment as well. That's more kind of a scenario type of analysis. There is also, as far as I understood from Andreas, there's also the pedigree matrix, where for the individual processes we could indicate for all the indicators what is the level of certainty or the level of uncertainty that we have for all the information we include. You could say there are also ways to convert this qualitative. With 1 we are very certain and 5 we are rather uncertain. There are also ways to convert this qualitative indication into a quantitative estimate of the uncertainty in the overall assessment. That is also part of the decision support. Yeah. So that would be my question, my answer in short.
I have at least 4 questions. Can I put all of them on the table? The first one would be, one of the key concepts in developing the idea was the use of learning curves. And then, at least I've a bit missed where the learning curves have been implemented here. At a certain point you were talking about linearity of indicators, which to me is a bit against the concept of learning curves. My second question would be, what about rebound effects? I haven't heard about that. The third question would be to Paula, how you balance stakeholders' participation in workshop, where they are not balanced physically there, so how you balance the outcomes of their contribution. And on uncertainty, I mean, when we work on environmental life cycle assessment at midpoint, we already have quite a deal of uncertainty to deal, quite some uncertainty to deal with. If you move on environmental endpoint, you increase uncertainty. If now you move to 5 topics, you will be flooded with uncertainty. The question is, were you able to define a threshold above which basically your results don't make any sense because there is too much uncertainty in that you cannot really discriminate?
I hope I'm not responsible to answer all these 4 questions, but maybe you want to make a start with the learning curves?
Yeah, exactly. So in this first work package, we indeed were exploring the possibility of using learning curves for new technologies. I mean, for existing technologies which have been on the market for a decade, ideally several decades, this has been proven and successfully applied. But the question was, how do we account for technological progress for something, for a technology which is not yet there? We developed a sort of conceptual framework how this could be done. Basically, one needs to do process modeling. One needs to look at the individual unit processes. One needs to understand what the learning is for each unit process, but also the learning is what the learning is for the system as a whole. In principle, conceptually, this could be done. The question is how to come up with data. We actually had some suggestions which we tested. One could, for example, use general data as found from existing learning curves and apply them sort of in a generic approach to this framework. But one of the main problems is the systemic learning, because if one doesn't know how the system as a whole actually benefits, so basically combining the individual units may or may not lead to additional learning of the system as a whole, then one is in trouble. So we discussed these various approaches with an association of cost engineers in the Netherlands. we had these approaches, and we tried to come up together with a conclusion what could be done for ex-ante assessments. And the conclusion actually was that one cannot work with learning curves for an ex-ante assessment. One really would need to do a bottom-up analysis of a new technology. So, for example, if one has, in chemical industry, one is currently using distillation, one would say this instead should be done with membranes. One should do basic engineering of a membrane-based system, come up with cost for that system, and sort of build it up from scratch. The use of learning curves for very new technologies could lead to very wrong results. So we have a report on this, and we are explaining what the problems are, but we do not recommend to apply this for new technologies.
At the same time, I would also say that the glass is also kind of half full, in terms of that we showed for a limited number of technologies, environmental learning and also environmental scaling. So the environmental, altogether, what is environmental experience doing in terms of environmental impact. There we showed, for instance, for wind turbines and also for energy, engines with ETH, what the scaling and learning can basically do. That you don't have, if the power of an engine doubles, that the impact also doubles. That's actually not the case. So there are examples also within the ProSuite project where we show how learning and experience, learning and scaling can help to improve your assessment. Second question was about the rebound effects. And I see, Richard, you're looking at the floor, but maybe you're best positioned to answer that question.
Thanks for the question. It's, I think it was a challenging one for the project of this scope as well. From the when you include the rebound, is maybe what I'd firstly kind of say is if we talk about consumer rebound. So if we're actually producing things for consumers that are cheaper, then we want to see the rebound effect due to different expenditures that we like. We kind of separate that out first. Then obviously the one thing that you particularly need is to have the full-scale model, like basically the kind of economic model that we have, the full-scale model. You need to know what you're respending all your savings on. And we have implemented that. There was a point there in one of the slides that maybe was skipped over a little bit too quickly. That we basically, when we do have a process innovation that is saving money, reducing the cost of the product, is that this then basically gives you more discretionary spending, and then we want to see how that plays out in the economy, so how that money is re-spent. So, and this is basically just using generic multipliers for that. So yes, it's there, but to go beyond that, I think is actually very difficult, because if you want to look at, say, rebound in industry, then you're talking about production functions, and then if you start talking about how you're adjusting production functions, yes, it's possible in our framework, but you have to define that explicitly. And I think endogenizing rebound in terms of production functions is when you start getting into CG modeling and these kind of things. And from the outset, we don't consider that basically a traceable approach that we have in life cycle assessment, so we were never trying to implement that. We probably also are somewhat limited as well in the fact that we don't have full harmonization of methods, so where we can get some kind of information about the potential rebound in the input-output model, this isn't necessarily fed through the inventory results in the environmental assessment. So I think what we managed to achieve actually is kind of getting a framework that actually kind of sets up this a lot of place, and we have gone so far into actually producing results on these kind of things, especially for the economic indicators and social indicators that come out of the input-output model. But there's still maybe a little bit of refinement that could be done in the future.
The third question.
The way that we did it is, it's a difficult question. In the workshops we have organized people into working groups, and the idea, these groups were more homogeneous because the people that we were volunteering to participate were more or less the same background, but the idea was that we would have the groups with a mix of people. So we won't have a group of people from industry, another group of people from NGOs, and another from public authorities. So we would want to have mixed groups of people. And we would give time for these people to discuss and deliberate and try to come up with a consensus positioning of the cards. There were cases, for instance, I remember in one of the groups in Utrecht where there was no consensus, where there was differences. Okay, so we took that into consideration. So, but the idea, and ideally when we would be implementing, we didn't have that when we made these workshops. We still didn't have results from the case studies, and we still didn't have the DSS. Because in an ideal situation, you would have the decision support system working, you would have a particular case study that you'd be discussing, and you could, in these workshops, then discuss what are the implications for our results if you have this perspective or that. So the idea is not so much to come up with a definite and ideal or right set of weights, but to have the users and the participants in the workshops discuss what are the weights, what is the relative importance of the different criteria, and what are the implications on the final results of choosing different weights. So the idea is much more to foster this discussion than to come up to a consensus.
Yeah, but the point is, when you don't reach consensus, which is nearly always the case, then what you do?
I would say you show the results for the different positions. Because it's a choice. And it's values, and you cannot say that the values from some people are more correct than the values for other people. So it shows this descent to the final, as a final result. I would say there was no agreement. There are some people that think that this is more important and the outcome is this. There are the group of people who have these different preferences and the outcome is that. I would show this difference instead of forcing consensus. That would be my answer. I don't know if you like it.
But then you have no weighting system, basically.
You have different weighting systems, but there is no single weighting system that is correct. That's my point. Yeah, and there is no correct answer. So, because you cannot impose, so I would go for a more. I know that perhaps this is not the answer that you want, but.
I think we should apologize that we do not provide final truth in this meeting, Michael, but.
I think we need a prolongation in youth project.
Yeah.
Without money, you can prolong as much as you want.
Maybe before we go to because there was a fourth question on the uncertainty. I can briefly try to answer that. I think for the midpoints, we are quite good positioned in terms of having a quantitative indication about the uncertainty, the statistical uncertainty. In terms of the different cultural perspective, in terms of the archetypes, we are rather well positioned to also show the influence on the endpoint. So what, for instance, whether you go, for which time horizon you will go, for 100 years or infinite, what is that doing with your endpoint result? Whether you take all the substances into account or only the substances where you're sure about that they are carcinogenic. Like these choices, you can show the influence on the endpoint result. In terms of statistical uncertainty, so how sure are we that we get an increase of malaria in the next 100 years? That is something at this moment that we cannot quantify. At least we did not do that in the post-truth context. So statistical uncertainty, midpoint, yes. Cultural perspective, decision choice uncertainty, endpoint, also yes. Statistical uncertainty in the endpoint assessments, that is something that that is still on the table to do. We did not reach that part yet.
All right, so one more question from you.
Again, Heinz Stichhalter from Tübingen to Germany. I have a question regarding the aggregation of data, particularly regarding the social impact. So what you can expect in real economy is that economic operators remain in the legal framework of their particular country. But you may have different definitions, for example, of child laborers between different countries. So if you are collecting data for child labor and then aggregating it along the supply chain, get up with something really artificial. And when you use a reference system from different countries, is it really a reference system? So how do you deal with aggregating data for technologies or products which are actually not comparable?
You want to do the aggregating or from the social side? Andrea?
Paula said. I think, yeah, we realized that because our first approach was to get the data bottom up, and then you get into what is the definition they are using, what system boundaries, are double counting of child labor and forced labor, how do you avoid that? What we have done at this moment is to link the data with the data that is actually published by the International Labour Organization, which they already go through an effort of harmonizing definitions. So we are taking the data, which is sectoral data, and then you are locating your product in the sector via the input-output analysis. So it is, the uncertainty is high. I will argue the uncertainty of the other methodology because you already told of how you gather the data bottom up for the whole life cycle assessment, including background processes. It's equally hard. So I think and at this point where you have to be quite careful with what you are doing with the social assessment, and that's why when we are listing the case analysis, case studies, look at the results, you get the trend, and then we were lucky enough to have the database at the 9 region level, then we went one level further to see exactly where the data was coming from. Does it make sense? I may not be able to say it to the decimal, but does it make sense? Is the direction making sense? Which processes are coming from? Which sectors are coming from? And I think the issue of locating the countries, the region, the processes, where child labor will be increasing or decreasing because of your process, is already valuable information for a user, because you still have part, especially for ground process, where you can select product. Are we saying it's going to be 1.3 to the power of 10 to the power 6? There's a high uncertainty, but in the framework, we see an increase in the level. So we are not so concerned about the number, but the direction of the impact. Because that is increasing or is decreasing. Why? In which sectors? And is background process or foreground processes? Is a perfect system? No, but there is no perfect system at this moment. Doing a bottom-up have also a lot of uncertainties, plus it will be a partial LCA. So in this way, what do you want to look? It is an issue, you need to dig into it. As an user, it is really an issue. You have reasons to believe the number is not correct. You need to dig into it and put extra resources, which cannot be done at the level of assessment we are doing here for 2030 and the future.
Okay, so one last question maybe to the gentleman in the back before we go to lunch.
Thank you. Hofland from DSM once again. I've got a question. How are you going to prevent that the industry, once they find out about your work, perfect work by the way, abuses your weighting factors to promote their own product? Like maybe a quotation from a Dutch television commercial, goedgekeurd als beste door de Nederlandse Consumentenbond. Basically meaning approved as favorite by the Dutch Consumers Association. That's what I would call abuse. How would you prevent abuse of your weighting factors by the chemical industry?
Maybe transparency is the key word here.
Yeah.
I think that's the only answer to that question. I mean, the transparency of the product, of the results, would be the only way to prevent something being abused in that way.
In the Netherlands, what's useful when people make statements like that in commercial, they get fined.
Yeah.
But the fines are so ridiculously low that people nevertheless do it. Could be an option.
Okay, so
this is not a direct reply to Ad's question, although I think it does. Your comment does lie in the real universe, and we've agreed that without a lot more money, we cannot map the entire universe. I just wanted to give feedback about the normalization and the weighting and the integration from my position as a civil society stakeholder in the sustainability assessment. I perceive that over the course of the 4-year project, the commitment to the transparency of these end of their assessment processes has grown considerably. I'm not sure if the project members would be aware of this, but I remember very well the first project meeting in Utrecht when my colleague Nina Schneider and I were sitting in the room looking at the sort of basic picture of what they thought, what my colleagues thought the DSS would do, talking generally about what kind of decisions we want to support and so forth. And we were stamping on the floor and moving in our seats and constantly raising our hands and saying, but you know, we don't want one number at the end. We're sure we don't trust one number at the end. And we are very frightened about people just moving the cursor back and forth until they get the result that they really like. And so I'm very, very happy to see some of the features that we, as civil society, you know, end users or end beneficiaries, were asking for. We see the red flag on the social assessment part. We see comments coming up in the results saying, you've got to do more research here. You cannot just sit down and say, oh, it's great, you know, low risk perception, it's all good. And we are very, very pleased also with the explicit advice that comes to say, please report the diversity of your results and show the different outcomes that come if you confront different hypotheses.
Okay, so let's take
another 15 seconds. Yeah. Two suggestions to protect the Commission and yourself on this specific point, which is extremely important. Somewhere in the handbook you should add a disclaimer that whatever is here doesn't mean an automatic endorsement of the Commission. And then on the weighting chapter, maybe you should be more explicit, because here you refer to the weighting reflect the opinion of what's written. Several stakeholders. It's not clear that it's only me. It's probably you should say there that this should not be understood as being used. They should not be used for anything else than what is what's meant for within the project, so that you protect also yourself and people will not be able to say this is coming and is valid for everybody. So these two disclaimers would be useful.
Okay, so moving on to you. Closing it.
Okay, thank you all for the very lively discussion. It's time to go to lunch, and I would like to ask you to come back here in this room at 2 p.m. so we have sufficient time to hear all about the case studies. Thank you very much.